So just as we've seen in the report, President Tinubu recently ordered the implementation of Oronsaye's report targeted at restructuring federal government parastatals, departments, commissions and agencies. And then we saw that the House of Reps are of the opinion that this report might just be outdated, and he advised the president to go through it again, before coming into the implementation process. But before we go to what the reps has to say about it, how do you feel about the federal government planning to implement the Oronsaye report? Let's have you, Mr. Sayo.
Okay, in the first place, I think it's something that has become somewhat inevitable in the light of, one, the challenges facing the economy presently, the fact that the economy is not doing too well. And over the course of years, we've identified the unnecessarily huge bureaucracy as one of the major problems to efficiency of the public service itself, where you have so many agencies doing similar things, and then where you have too many overheads. For every CEO or a staff, you have to have complement of staff and all of those things. So, in a way, for a country like Nigeria that's going through a very difficult phase, I think it's just a moment to implement such court-cutting measures. Now, you refer to whether or not it's been updated, because the report itself is quite some years old now. I do not think that should be a hindrance to its implementation, because essentially what I'm going to do, some of the outlines of those things to be matched, they're already there. And nothing stops even the new committee from identifying other new agencies that have come on board since for merger. So it's not as if the report itself is casting some stones. Okay. The United Administration produced the white paper.
Yeah.
The Buhari that came after it also produced his own white paper. And so this administration is not necessarily bound. If this administration felt bound by those white papers, it's just a matter of saying, okay, go ahead and implement. But they're saying, look, let's have another committee look at it again to see how we can use this report to achieve this very same objective of streamlining bureaucracy and streamlining the process of its efficiency. I think it's a very good move at this point in time.
All right, so Mr. Achike, do you agree?
Well, I think the president has achieved a reputation of shooting before asking questions. And I think we see that even with this Oronsaye report. Now they are setting up a committee to also look at it. And the president had declared that it was going to be implemented 100%. Of course, obviously, he's not in a position to determine that it can be implemented 100%. And the reason is simple. It's all of these agencies came in as a matter of law. Laws were promulgated by the National Assembly, bringing them into existence. And so for you to dismantle these organizations or these agencies and parastatals, you also have to go back and seek the instrumentality of the law for you to be able to do that. And then to merge what you have to merge, the ones that we have to go into oblivion, that will have to be done. So I don't know the motivation for the president wanting to implement that. Obviously, there are some virtues in it. There are some good things because, from what we have seen in the past, even when Oronsaye released that report, it was clear that there were so many issues and distortions within the bureaucracy, where you have different organizations doing similar things and all that. And so there's a need to also streamline so that we know who is doing what and all that. But I don't know whether it was done altruistically on the basis of the need to actually restructure all of this, what is going on in the ministries, or whether it was because of the pressure as a result of the crisis, economic crisis, especially in the land, and that something needed to be given to the people to show that there is a movement in the right direction. But be that as it may, there are some virtues in it. I know it's not just the National Assembly that's talking about it being obsolete, because we have to move with the times. Femi Falana has also talked about it. That some of the reasons for these measures might have been overtaken by circumstances. We don't know until perhaps they look into it. But beyond that, again, the contradiction of this, and there's a very big contradiction which a lot of ordinary Nigerians themselves pointed out, and that is the fact that the president wants to trim down, cut down on expenses, which is a wonderful thing. It's a good thing. We actually need it because of where we are today financially. But this is the president that has the biggest cabinet in the world, 48 ministers. 48 ministries. And so that's a contradiction. And that's at the time he was coming up with as much as 48 ministries. The economic conditions in the country were the same. And you understand it, of course, it has gotten worse now. So it's not as if he didn't know that things were exceedingly very bad. And so why this? You understand, when you have not been able to, just a few months ago, people were warning that, look, this is becoming, your cabinet will be the biggest, and that the country can ill afford it. So that's the contradiction in the whole of this, and that's why sometimes we doubt whether it is just that whether the president is trying to create a bit of a diversion because of the myriads of socio-economic problems that he's facing. Sometimes when you do all of these things, people's attention is diverted, and they'll begin to talk about it for the next 1 week or 2 weeks before something else, comes on board. But if they can go through the nitty-gritty of it, go through the National Assembly, let them look at it again, and see whether there are some agencies that can be saved. For instance, I might be uncomfortable a bit with merging 1 or 2 ministries, 1 or 2 agencies together. While it is very clear that some agencies should be made and others should be outright, taken out completely. So, it depends.
Okay. So I was actually even going to hit on the cabinet part, because now, looking at, we'll have to pull down some ministries and agencies. Do you also feel that the cabinet will needs to be reduced as well?
You see, I don't want to go to that default setting of looking at government policies only in terms of, looking at motives, whether it's driven by some. I want to look at it objectively, on the surface, for what it is. Now, the president, obviously, a lot of people have questions to, they face questions about the size of the cabinet itself, that this is probably the largest, but the president says, I have been given a job to do, and that job requires me to break down some of this. For instance, we knew that our ministry was under, was subsumed with works and housing, and the president says the issues in power, they are so massive that require full attention on this. Gas is a major issue in this country today. Nigeria is a gas producing country, as against being a petrol oil producing country. Nigeria has more resources in the area of gas. So it depends on the focus of the president in terms of his own objective as a leader at the moment. So it's of no moment to me from someone to say the economy is large. It depends on his own objective. But then we are talking about structures and parasites that have been created over the years, whose roles have become something more or less like nebulous. They are really not adding value in terms of public service delivery. Okay? You have such agencies, we can name some of them who are that are just there. For instance, you have agencies in the Pharmaceutical Research Institute, you have one for research in alternative medicine, and then you ask yourself, what are they researching in? Everything comes down to basic research. Yeah. So why don't you put them together? Okay, so if several years ago, the preceding governments have realized that, look, some of these agencies, because of the nature of their functions, they need to be put together. And the following one said, yes, I think there's a merit in this. And now, he didn't do it. For whatever reason, the others couldn't do it. And now somebody says, okay, let's look at it again. There is some merit in this. Let's look at it. I don't think we should stop at, then we'll leave the merit and then we begin to chase charges and say, because the president has bigger cabinet. I believe that we should look at it in terms of the objectives that the president has himself said of it. He said he was going to implement 100%. Yes, and why not? His party controls the National Assembly. Okay, so if you are talking about legislative enactment, it's in a position to push through his amendments. I wouldn't expect the president to say, because this is require legislative amendments, then it cannot be done. If a leader says cannot be done, then why is he a leader? He is saying, yes, these objectives are worth pursuing, and we are going ahead to pursue those objectives. And nothing says that even the House will not introduce new amendments. They might even find some agencies that maybe they are recommended for, maybe for merger, and say, no, we don't have to do with this. So everything will still have to go through that process that is, part of our national institution building. So I don't think there's any big deal about that. But you see, the problem with Nigeria is that we have so much, because we're in a political system, some people think they have not gotten outside of that mode, the election mode. So there's that default setting that everything the president will be saying from the prism of politics, from the prism of trying to run that election down, and this will continue. Of course, this is politics. I don't have any problem with that. But see, my own is that if we must discuss some of these policies, let's look at it objectively in terms of what exactly does it seek to achieve, and how can the system, how can this action be helped to attain that objective, rather than just each time we lapse into that default mode. It has to be shut down. The president means he wants to distract people because this is what is happening. This is what is happening. I don't think it's helpful for understanding the
Okay. All right. So I think one of the fears that has arisen at the course of all this, the Oronsaye report thing, is the loss of jobs. So there's been these speculations that once this is being implemented, I mean, we're bringing out ministries, we're merging, so which means some people will be laid off. But the federal government have come out to say no one will lose their job. Do you believe that no one is losing their jobs?
Easier said than done. I mean, the reality, if our history serves us well, the government is not saying the truth.
Okay.
I mean, this is politics. They want to look good. That is definitely going to happen. They made the same statements in the past with regards to the privatized, parastatals and, the establishments of, government, the machine tools, Shogbo, the Daily Times and all that. So public enterprises. Each time, even with the issue of the consolidation of the banks, the CBN made statements to that effect, the CBN government to that effect, government, BP made statements to that effect. In fact, it was conditioned, part of the conditions for even the sale of government assets to some of these private bodies was that there must not be job losses, and they would always promise there won't be job losses. Immediately the exercise is consummated, the next thing is just they embark on a job loss, and there is no government or government agency to protect the workers. So this is not a new thing. It is going to happen. It's as simple as that. But let me just say something. This issue of yes, it's election season is over, and then people are still in that default mode of the election, and so anything the government does, I think it's a blackmail of the Nigerian people. The Nigerian people have a right at every particular point in time to ask questions about their government and about governance, and people should not attribute politics to it, because that is what we are seeing today. That every time people are talking, even when politicians talk, and politicians should be political. When politicians talk, they accuse them of being partisan, of being political. And there is nothing, for instance, that this government, that people have done with regards to the criticism of this government, that members of this government did not do to the previous government when they were out of power and there was another government in place. In fact, they did much worse in terms of criticism. Even when elections had come and the elections had gone, they continued criticizing. And there was absolutely nothing wrong with it, because that is, look, it has been said that the price we have to pay for our democracy is eternal vigilance. And part of that vigilance is that you hold the government to the fire at every particular point in time. That the country is where it is today after 60-something years of independence is simply because we as a people have not done the job of holding our leaders accountable. And so if we had done more along that line, perhaps some of the liberties that they have gotten away with over the years, they might not have gotten away with them. The purchases of 160 million naira worth of jeeps in the midst of economic difficulties, the approval of 1.5 billion naira for the office of the First Lady in the midst of excruciating poverty, and hunger in the land and all of those things. It is the duty and the responsibilities of the people to do that, and people must not attribute politics to it when people are talking about their lives, about their existence, and try to hold leadership accountable. Then the next thing is just to try to blackmail them that they are still in the default mode. Even if they're in the default mode of election, what import is it to you? Your duty is that you have been elected, to govern this country, and so you need to shut up your critics by the actions that you do, by your ability, by the outcomes of the actions and the policies that you have put in place. That is what is expected of you. That is the only way the critics can be kept quiet, by good governance. It's as simple as that. For instance, in the West Africa, for all of a sudden people are talking about the spate of coups that are taking place all the while, and why we must stridently continue to condemn military coups in the West African continent. We must hold political leaders responsible for the basis of the coups that are being undertaken by the soldiers. Because the reality is that once you begin to get it right, in terms of good governance, and you're able to deliver, it becomes very difficult for any group of military adventurers to come, on air and to announce to the people that they are going to take over. What are you taking over? when the government is working, when the politicians are fulfilling, are responsible and sensitive, and are fulfilling their political objectives and obligations to the people. So these are some of the issues.
All right. So quickly coming back to the report, the Oronsaye's report. What else? What are the concerns? Because right now we're only looking at, everyone understands that, okay, this report is being brought in a bid to cut down the costs, and all of that. But looking at the negative effects of this, we've already mentioned loss of jobs. What else do we see? What are our concerns concerning this report? Probably like the negative effect of this on the country as a whole.
Let's just say that there's no policy of government that will not come with downsides.
Definitely.
You see, but you look at the other objectives of what this policy seeks to achieve. You see an agency, you see maybe 3 or 4 agencies being brought together now. That means you won't have 3 MDs. Okay?
It will be one.
It will now be one. Okay? It's been said. Look at the university system now. We hear university being established every day, federal universities here and there, and the question has been raised. Why don't we expand the capacity of the state universities? In other words, some of these universities, if you can mark like 3 or 4, you have only one VC. You can expand departments, raise some faculties to the level of colleges, and then properly streamline the operations for delivery. At least to be far more cost effective than having demigods in every corner, because that's what really happens. So I can agree in principle. Look, let's be honest. Some of these agencies can work better if you put them together. Okay, under a common leadership that has an objective. You have so many departments under the same agencies. Will it lead to a lot of jobs? Ultimately, yes. But I think the government knows that at this time, the objective is not to get anybody out of job, but ultimately first and foremost to reduce the associated bureaucracy around them, and then ultimately, look, people retire almost every day in service. They exit. Yes. And if you don't exit, there will no entry.
Spot for you.
Okay, so ultimately, it's something that will take a bit of time. I do not think we can sit down here and pretend that any policy will not have its own downside. That's not the issue. But the issue is that, you see, we must at a point learn to actually bite the bullet. Okay, at some point, because it is necessary. Look at we are talking about Ola. Look at, let's use the example of our refineries. Look at all those refineries. The number of refineries there, the number of workers there. If it's a private refinery, you probably need a quarter of that to get refineries working. And that's the working template for most public organizations. You have so many people working who are not delivering value. In my own office, where I work in the private sector, it's so easy. If you are nothing doing, you'll be asked to go home. Yes. Okay, to find some other things to do. But in government, when you get the letter of appointment, you have it for life. And so there's no commitment to service delivery. And so you have so many dead rules in the system. Now, do they serve the public? The answer is no. So ultimately, the system will take care of such things. And I don't think we should fear the consequences. I think we should be more concerned about how does it translate to the public good. Okay? Because that's the area that should concern us. Not because if we choose to look at the downsides, not a single policy of government will be enacted in this country, because there's no single policy that will not have its own downsides.
All right. So we had the former presidential candidate Peter Obi coming out to support and commend the step the president took in the whole Oronsaye report thing. But he advised that the government should not be in a hurry to implement it. So he advised that they should take their time, look at it and work with the committee and just not be in a hurry to implement it. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, well, it's maybe he's just saying, maybe another way is just be circumspect about the whole report. It's not as if, I'm not sure there are many Nigerians that would say that the recommendation of Oronsaye was very wrong. In fact, I think it was something that surprised a lot of Nigerians. They would have a lot of parastatals, departments, and where nothing is being done, and yet salaries are being spent on a daily basis. Look, so it's about efficiency. I agree. There's no doubt about that. But it's also about going about it the way they want to do. Let them also not make mistakes, and let them be careful. Look, I'm worried about the mentality of the average Nigerian politician, especially those elected public officials. And for me, my position has always been that they are neither committed nor patriotic. And so some of the things we see as outcomes of their involvement in the system, I'm not surprised that they don't bode well for the country. For instance, some of the things my colleague here said, it doesn't make sense. We have existing, tertiary education institutions in this country. For a very long time, there's been a running battle between ASU, NASU, and some of the unions within these organizations. And the majority of their problem has always stemmed from lack of funding, proper funding, either in terms of salary, in terms of building of infrastructure, repairing of infrastructure, and all that. Then you now have a situation where dozens of new universities and colleges of education, and polytechnics are springing up every single year, being approved by the National Assembly, who is also aware about the inability of the existing infrastructure, that education infrastructure that the country has to deliver on their mandate. And part of the reason essentially is funding. It is because of the lack of funding that some of these units within this organization, this universities, this system, are always on strike. So why not? And I agree. If you also expand what you have, the existing infrastructure, and bring some of these institutions together, what you do is that you also expand the ability of these institutions to still take in more students, which is the essence of even setting up these organizations in the first place. Then you're able to cut on cost of a few of other things, in terms of overhead, in terms of salaries, lecturers, and the rest. But so it's amazing that they know what is on ground, and they keep on turning on this system for the presidents to sign. And presidents have also been culpable in this. They have been signing this whenever the National Assembly approves, they sign it. And so what exactly is going on? Is it about ensuring that there's something for the boys? That because usually the people who are making a case to establish universities are people who are very well connected and to very high level government officials. And so it is something that gives you an impression that we're not exactly ready to run the country as it should be run.
All right. So